This is tutorial 4, operational air combat. We covered air combat tactics in an earlier tutorial. The components that we need for this are the air detection chart. Very briefly, we have at the top range in hexes. The bolded numbers on the top are strategic hexes, and the lighter tinted colors are the operational hexes. The black dots indicates the range of weapons. And you have it for the ships of the different parties. Here you have airborne early warning aircraft. We're going to use some of this information, but we're not going to refer to it while we're doing the tutorial. Of particular interest is the F-14 AWACS and the Tupolev 126 AWACS, and we're interested in the row that refers to aircraft. So this indicates hex 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, hex 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that number must be rolled or a value less than that number in order to successfully make a detection of an opposing aircraft. Also of interest here are the detection capabilities of different units. In particular here is the Iranian airbase. It can detect at a 0 hex range of 7 and a 5. And the Soviets, their airbase can detect also at a range of 0, they have to roll 7 or less, or a range of 1 hex, 5 or less. For this, we're also going to need 2 undetected markers. Now this here is the airbase chart, and each of these segments correspond to a particular airbase. So here on this map, we have a Soviet airbase at Shiraz. We have an Iranian airbase here at Bandar Abbas. We have an Iranian F-14, which is operating in the AWACS role. Here, just to the north of the airbase, we have a Soviet Tupolev 126 MOS, airborne early warning aircraft. Now you're going to see that each of these segments has a different number of rows. The Americans have the most, the most columns. Each column corresponds to 1 action stage. In a single game turn, there are 3 action stages. And the aircraft may not launch more than once in any given action stage, but it means they can launch up to 3 times in a given turn, 1 for each action stage. The Soviets have a slightly less efficient aircraft maintenance, so they can launch a maximum of 2 action stages, and the Iranians and all other non-NATO, non-Soviet members can only launch in 1 action stage. So what we have here are airbase. These correspond to the 2 air bases on the map. You may have no more than 3 aircraft assigned either interceptor or offensive missions on an airbase, although it can be a combination. You could have 2 interceptors and 1 offense. You could have additional remaining aircraft here at the airbase, but they can't be assigned to a mission. And in any given air mission, all of the aircraft on the mission must come from the same airbase. And so the effect of that is you can never have more than 3 aircraft that are launched. These aircraft can be assigned anti-air missions or strike missions, and we looked at those earlier. Here we're not going to be using those markers. So in this particular case, we've got 3 Iranian F-4 Phantoms on an offensive mission at Bandar Abbas, and they're going to conduct an airstrike against the airbase, the Soviet airbase at Shiraz. So the way that aircraft launch is they're launched in increments of 2 hexes. So these Iranian aircraft are launched, and they start off initially undetected. The Soviets can attempt to detect them, but they cannot conduct an intercept until those aircraft are detected. So what we're interested in here is at what point this stack of Iranian aircraft can be detected by the Soviet MOS. Now, the F-4 Phantom in particular has a very long range, and you'll see that its range is 10 strategic hexes. So that corresponds to 10 times 10, which is basically 100 hexes, but that's a round trip. So it can go at 5 strategic hexes and 5 strategic hexes back. So it's going to move in increments of 2. Now these are airborne early warning aircraft. These aircraft cannot be destroyed, but whenever an aircraft with anti-air ability moves into the same hex as these aircraft are removed and they come back the next turn. In effect, they're chased away off the map. The Americans have E-2Cs and AWACS, the Russians have a Tupolev MOS, and the Iranians have this F-14 with no combat values at all. It functions entirely for detection purposes. So this stack is going to continue moving towards the airbase until it gets within range of the Soviet MOS. Now, a player may make a detection attempt only one once every strategic hex. In other words, 10 operational hexes. So you want to sort of calculate at what range you're going to make the detection attempt. Now the Tupolev MOS has this value here for air detection, and this is here is the range of one strategic hex. So it's going to make its first attempt at a range of 8 hexes. All right, so these aircraft are going to approach 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So at this range, the Soviets can make an attempt. Their chance of making a detection is only 1 at a range of 8 hexes. So we can presume they made an attempt and then failed. The next time they can try is when they get to one strategic hex, which is a range of 6 hexes. Or rather, five operational hexes, because then they'll have gone from 1 strategic hex to 0 strategic hexes, and that attempt is valued at 4. So this is going to move in increments of 2 hexes, and it gets to within 5 hexes, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it gets to within this range. Now, the Soviets will assume that they made their roll to detect and they've successfully conducted their detection. Now they can launch interceptors because they've detected. Now, the general rule is the unit that makes the detection must also have the within its detection range the intercepting units. And this is true for all countries, except the Soviets and Americans don't have to follow that rule. One unit can detect in one part of the map, and it can provoke, or rather lead to interception by aircraft from another section of the map because of satellite communications. So what the Soviets do right away is they launch their aircraft. And the way the movement works is aircraft move in increments of 2 hexes. So the Soviets are immediately going to take off and move 2 hexes. Now, in addition to that, the Soviets have a special kind of aircraft, the MiG-23, and this is sort of from the extra rules, the supplementary rules that came from the game that came after the Aegean strike. There are 3 classes of aircraft. The difference between the aircraft is in speed, and it leads to a bonus of 10 hexes. So class 1 is helicopters, class 2 are slower 2nd and 3rd generation aircraft, and you've got class 3, which is 4th generation aircraft, like the F-14, the F-15, and the MiG-23. These guys basically go supersonic for longer. And so the Soviets can actually jump 10 hexes right away. They get a 10 hex bonus because the F-4s are class 2, the MiG-23 is class 3. So you have a one-time only 10 hex jump, and so the Soviets land on top of the Iranian aircraft. Now the Iranian aircraft are subject to attack, but before the attack occurs, they make a detection attempt. The F-4 cannot help. Rather, the F-14 cannot help because its detection range doesn't encompass that area. It can only reach out to 4 hexes, so it mixes it by 1 hex. So the Iranian F-4 is going to attempt to detect it on its own. And so here we go to the other side of the chart, and we can identify an F-4, and the American and Iranian F-4 are the same. And you always start with a detection attempt. So the Iranians have they have to roll a 5 or less in order to detect the Soviet aircraft, and let's assume they make a detection. And then now that the detection attempt has been made, you then resolve the combat. And for that, you can refer to the tactical tutorial that occurred earlier. There's a much longer explanation between much longer ranged aircraft in the examples of play.